Hey everyone, welcome back to Say What Now, where we're going to talk about uh, everything from pop culture to politics to everything in between, quite frankly. Today is International Women's Day, and it's March, so it's Women History Month. So happy International Women's Day to all of the women across there who are watching our broadcast. Today has been hashtag friendly for women across social media. And so I would like to definitely uplift a lot of the women that are influential to me across media, my family, of course, my mother, my grandmother, all of my aunts and cousins who are paving the way, of course, my sorors in Delta who have been making strides in entertainment, in politics, in law, science, education, you name it, they're doing it, and they're doing it in a mighty way. And then some of the women that I've been able to read about, definitely want to uplift um, people like Malala, who is still trying to get education equity for women and girls back home, where in her native land and across the Arab world and across around the world, because so many young girls do not have access to education like we are afforded here too in the United States. And so she's a young girl who risked her life to fight for education for girls, and was shot in the head by the Taliban, who successfully recovered from that after being lifted to England and spent some time in London recovering from her injuries, and has been nominated, I think, and won the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts. And it's just really doing some phenomenal things across the country. She's written a book, which I would love to pick up and read sometime very soon, because I know that it is going to be inspiring for me and for other activists across the country who want to make their mark on the world. And this young woman who has done so at a really tender age, I think she was shot at 14, and it's been a few years now. So she's about 16 or 17 years old and is already doing so many great things to find her passion about education. People like I call it a sorority that no one wants to join, which is a sorority of women who have lost their children to gun violence, and particularly police directed violence or vigilante violence. So the mothers of Trayvon Martin, the mother of Jordan Davis, the mother of Mike Brown, the mother of Rakia Boyd, the mother of so many young, unarmed Black men and women who have been killed by the police, who have, through their pain, decided to use that tragedy within their life. A couple of them, that was the only child that they had, but have used that tragedy to highlight the fact that we need to do some type of reform around gun and gun violence, as well as pressure Congress and state and local officials to change the laws and make these occurrences easier, and also that make these occurrences difficult for federal prosecutors to hold folks accountable. Recently, I saw Lucia McBath. She was uh, talking in Texas at a convention and talking about her story. It actually happened to be Jordan's birthday. She's the mother of Jordan Davis, who was gunned down in November of 2012 by Michael David Dunn. And she was talking about her story, and you could still feel it resonate through the screen about how she's still trying to cope with the loss of her only child. And then it really connects with someone who I've always had a profound respect for, which is Mamie Till Mobley, who is the mother of Emmett Till, who sent her child down to Mississippi to be with his family over one summer in 1955, and he came back in a wooden box, and he came back with his body bloated and his tongue cut. And after members of the Klan, quite frankly, in the town of Money, Mississippi, decided that it was a capital offense for him to make some gesture towards a white woman. It's been reported that he whistled at her, he made a snide comment towards her, regardless of what he did to her. At 14 years of age, he was dragged out of his uncle's house when he was sharing a bed with one of his cousins. He was brutalized. He was shot. He was had an um, iron piece of equipment tied around his neck and thrown into the Tallahatchie River in Mississippi, only to have his bloated body rise up in the river days later, and was identified by his uncle and then shipped back to Chicago. And his mother, his grief-stricken mother, who was very young herself, um, received the body of her only child, and decided that through her pain, through her grief, she would not have a closed casket. She would open the casket so that, and allow Jet Magazine to take pictures of her child to show the world what racism and hatred, and evil, how it is personified, by showing what happened to her son. And she's really, if you can call it, a founder of the sorority that no one wants to be a part of. She really is one of those founders that through her pain has been able to illuminate what we need to do to be a better country, in changing how we are trying to change even the essence of who we are, even our DNA. And she is someone that I have always had profound respect for and want to learn more about her life and how she was able to carry on after the tragedy of losing both her husband as well as her child. And then people like the women of those who were made widows in the 60s. So people like Myrlie Evers Williams, who I've had the great honor and privilege of meeting a couple of times and being able to speak with her briefly through her role as one of the chairman emeriti of the NAACP. And people like Coretta Scott King, the late Coretta Scott King, who I never had an opportunity to meet, but understand the life that she lived while her husband was alive, and then the life that she created for herself in trying to carry on his legacy after he was assassinated. People like Dr. Betty Shabazz, who carry on the legacy of Malcolm X, but also created a life of her own and went on to become a PhD in trying to continue Black liberation and liberation movement, even while raising 6 daughters by herself. These women are a testament of what you can do when your back is essentially against the wall, but understand that there is a calling upon your life, that and you have um, your own destiny and your own um, really foundation of which you need to leave something upon the world. And so they're just tremendous women. You have even women of this age, women that I have had the privilege of learning from and being mentored by, that I learned from at law school or at undergrad, or even through my formative years in Michigan. There have been women throughout my life that I've been blessed to learn from, and we often take the role of women for granted, no matter if they are teachers or people who have been in the civil rights movement. But we need not, because they have been there often when nobody else was there. That they were not just people who were in the kitchen or in behind the scenes, but they were really on the front lines. And I really appreciate so many women authors who found it not robbery to tell the story of the women in the civil rights movement and Black liberation movements, and in all movements, quite frankly. And the role that women, and particularly women of color, Black women in particular, have made throughout the history of the United States and throughout the history of the world, because our stories are just not told enough about the pivotal roles that we make in reforming this third planet, this third rock from the sun. And so happy International Women's Day. There are so many women across the globe that are really doing phenomenal work that I hope that we take all month long to uplift them and all year long to uplift them. We really can't talk about them enough, about the work that women do to make our world a better place. You can see that crystal clear in some of the atrocities that we're seeing across the country, where women have been the ones that have uplifted the issue. Whether you're talking about Flint, whether you're talking about voter ID issues, if you're talking about the race for the White House, quite frankly, there are women all across, in all levels, in all roles, that are trying to ensure that we all have a seat at the table, but not just a seat at a table, but a good voice at the table as well. So definitely want to lift that up, and happy International Women's Month, or Women's Day. And I hope that you had the opportunity to say thank you to a woman in your life that has made a difference for you personally, professionally, in your city, town, or state. Um, Take this time, take this opportunity to thank her, because she may not have heard a thank you today. So definitely want to do that. Switching gears a little bit, we've been talking ever since the creation of Say What Now about what is going on in the race for the White House. It seems like every week we have something crazy, something else crazy to talk about with this race for the White House. It almost is like November can't get here quickly enough, because it's every day something is going on. The latest issue happens to be on the Democratic side, where Senator Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton had a recent town hall in Flint, Michigan, to highlight what has happened in that city, and to talk about what they would do to help restore trust in the government, but also try to um, talk about racial justice issues as well. And so it's been widely talked about since Sunday's debate about what Senator Sanders said about people. He was pointedly asked what he would do, or what kind of racial blinders did he have. And as um, pretty much everybody around the world has already heard by now, his response was it was muffled. It was a gaffe. I remember I tweeted as soon as he made the comment that it's not going to be well for him, and that I did not know how he was going to be able to climb out of it. He was not able to climb out of it. He tried to make a second comment to clarify or correct what he said, and it made it worse. And just frankly, it has the potential to eliminate the kind of problems that he is having across the country, and particularly in the South, with voters of color, Black voters in particular. And what he said, in essence, was that his gaffe, so call it whatever you want, is that that white people really cannot have a difficulty identifying, because they are not familiar with ghettos. Um, they're not familiar with being poor. They're not familiar with something else, which obviously it's ludicrous. He knows it's ludicrous. We knew it was ludicrous. It was ludicrous then. It was ludicrous now. It will forever be ludicrous. The fact of the matter is that poverty is not in one race or ethnicity. Poverty comes, unfortunately, in the richest nation on earth, which in and of itself is ridiculous that we still have people that are impoverished in this nation. But poverty is just not a Black thing. It is a American thing that we have to work together to eradicate. Living in meager means is not a Black thing. It is an American thing. There are folks who live in ghettos. There are folks that live in trailer parks. There are folks live in that don't have homes at all. And that being Black does not give you knowledge about any one of those things. As I said in my social media spaces this week, until I went to college, I did not know what it was like to live in an apartment. I was fortunate and blessed enough to be able to live in a house my entire life. We owned a house, or we lived with my grandmother for a short period of time, who was also living in a house that we owned. And so to say that that being Black is equated with knowing what it's like to be poor, I don't know what it's like to be poor, outside of being everybody, for the most part, being poor in college. I don't know what that's like. And so I I am definitely Black. And so you cannot equate those two things. They're not, being Black is not synonymous with being poor or living in a ghetto. Um, I know people who have grown up in those types of environments, and they are Black. I know people who have grown up in those environments and who are not Black, and so it underscores either the difficulty with being able to think on your feet, or it just underscores the lack of interaction with people of color, or um, just because I really don't honestly think that it can be just as simple as you just made a gaffe, or you just made a mistake in that statement, because that statement um, is echoed by so many people that Blackness is synonymous with knowledge or intimate knowledge about poverty. I can read about poverty. I can read the studies about poverty. I can go to impoverished places in my city or other cities across the country and speak to people who have been in poverty. But unless I um, become impoverished, I have no idea of what that is like. And our job is not to necessarily um, have to be in that space to know what it's like, to have some empathy for those people who experience what it is like to be impoverished, to not know where your next meal comes from, to not know if you're going to get another check to be able to feed your family, to not know if the lights will be able to be turned on, or the rent will be able to be paid for the month, or I can send my kids to childcare, or if I'm going to have enough money to get shoes for them so that they can go to school. I may not know what it's like, but I do understand that we need to create policy so that no other American knows that knows what that's like anymore. I do understand that um, that unfortunately education um, is tied to housing, and it's tied to property rates. And so if you're in impoverished places, you're more likely than not to have poor educational or poor access to to high quality education. And so you need to eradicate that link between um, property taxes and funding for schools, so that even low income children are able to access high quality public education. It doesn't have to come from charter schools. It can come from their neighborhood schools. I can understand both of those without being intimately involved in the knowledge of what it means to be impoverished in this nation. And so that is the link that we really would like for folks like Senator Sanders to be able to explain to us that just because you have not been Black, you are not Black. We want to for you to understand and be able to empathize with some of the plight that Black people have to deal with, and what is your policies to help eradicate the injustices that Black people and other people of color face in this nation, and that you understand or are willing to understand in a greater detail what those things are, have really thought about how you can go about changing those, and really feel that you will go and have the right attorney general to make sure that you prosecute civil rights crimes, either some civil or criminal crimes, that you will appoint a strong EPA administrator to ensure that the Safe Water Drinking Act and the lead and copper rules are made up to date and that are strictly enforced, and that communities of color are not disproportionately affected by poor water and poor air, and that landfills are not only built upon schools and communities of color, that you find reasonable ways to dispose of waste that does not have a bad or poor impact upon communities of color. We want to make sure that you will work with governors to ensure that they expand Medicaid, and so that our lower income Americans will have access to quality health care, no matter if they are Black or white. Those are the things that we want to ensure that you understand and are taking policy steps to fix. But if you are having difficulty with that, if you can't find a way to be able to articulate that at a debate under the hot lights of CNN or MSNBC or Fox, then you can't make that next step to go to the White House and be the president to appoint these people to do these works. And so I hope that Senator Sanders finds some people on his team to be able to help him think through some of these items, because it would be unfortunate if he would have to go through this entire race without being able to clearly articulate beyond the criminal justice context what he is going to do to help communities of color in this country and impoverished communities outside of the criminal justice context or talking about income inequality. So it was disturbing on so many different levels to hear what he was saying, as well as to listen to the backlash. A lot of his supporters were trying to help him and come to his defense on this. And really, it's just that I either made a mistake and this is what I believe, or I need to get more knowledge about this. And please help me find the people that will help me find out where I was wrong and become better educated about the plight of African Americans in this country. But it is interesting to note that he has not won one contest in a state, caucus or primary, that is that the voters are predominantly voters of color. Tonight is the Mississippi primary, and Secretary Clinton, I'm watching CNN's results right now, and Secretary Clinton beat him 84% to 16%. If I'm waiting for their numbers to come back up on the screen so that I can make sure that that is accurate, but that's ridiculous. Ever since the primary in South Carolina, there's been the South Carolina primary, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, now Mississippi, Louisiana. He is being trounced in all of these states, which are predominantly people of color that are voting in the Democratic primary. And that's a problem for me, that after one of these states, you should have been circling the wagon saying, hey, what am I missing? How do I connect with African American voters? What is it that I am not conveying how is it that I'm not conveying my message and helping them understand that my message is applicable to not only liberal whites, but also Black. It's applicable to all people, because I'm going to have to govern all of America. What am I missing? But though it has only been 2 or 3 weeks since the South Carolina primary, and we have gone through just about the entire South in the Democratic primary, each state has reinforced this notion that Black voters are not going to turn out for Bernie Sanders, that they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton. And you can spin it until you're dizzy. But the fact of the matter is that until he really goes out and addresses this disconnect between Black voters and his message, it's going to be a problem when the most loyal base of the Democratic Party happens to be Black people and other people of color. And if you cannot win over Black people, you cannot be the Democratic nominee. It just is not going to work. And so you need to really figure it out. I hope he does figure it out. There are a lot of Black people on his team, on his their national surrogates for him that really are trying to champion his cause, so, which is another reason why I'm just so confused about why there's this huge disconnect between him, his message, and the Black vote. But he really has got to get it together quickly, because it's amazing to me that it's amazing to me how this continues to happen over and over and over again, and nobody has pulled him aside and said, hey, we need to get this together. I'm a loss, really. I'm a loss for words about how this keeps happening to him. But we'll see what happens. My home state of Michigan, the results are going to come in about 18 minutes or so, and we'll see how well he did in Michigan. My home county, Washtenaw County, um, it doesn't have a lot of people of color per se in my county. I am very interested to see how he will do in Wayne County. Wayne County county seat is Detroit, obviously, and so that is obviously where a lot of Black people live. Though it is the demographics of Detroit is changing a little bit, but for now it is predominantly people of color in Wayne County and in Detroit, and so I'll be very interested to see how he does. And of course, if y'all don't know about the geographics of Michigan, Michigan is made up of two peninsulas. There's the Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula. The Upper Peninsula and the northern half of Michigan um, is very white, and so I'm interested to see how the split between the UP and the Lower Peninsula of Michigan differs between Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton. Also, the Lower Peninsula, where the majority of the population of Michigan is, it splits down the middle between the east and the west of Michigan, where the western part of Michigan is very conservative. It's very rural in the middle part of the Lower Peninsula and some parts of the western as well. And so there are some cities in the western part. So you have your Benton Harbors, you have Grand Rapids in the northern western part of the Lower Peninsula, you have Kalamazoo, you have a huge, in Kalamazoo also happens to be where Western Michigan University is located, and Senator Sanders does pretty well with college students. And so I'll be very interested to know exactly where his votes come from, as well as where Secretary Clinton's votes come from. I have a feeling that she will, because of the people who have already endorsed her candidacy, that she would 9 times out of 10 will win Detroit. She probably will win Flint and Saginaw, where a lot of African American Michiganders live. She will probably win in Kalamazoo and in Benton Harbor, which is over there by Lake Michigan. And I think that Senator Sanders will get in the middle of the area. He'll probably win Kalamazoo. He may tie her for Kalamazoo or may get it close. I suspect that he will win in Washtenaw County, which is where the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor is. Maybe even towards the southern part of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, where it's a little bit more rural, little less people of color in the area. And so I don't know, it's almost mind-boggling if it wasn't so crucial of a race and so glaring as far as the separation between the votes that Secretary Clinton is getting and the votes that he is getting. It's just, it is what it is. So that's what's going on with the race right now. I would be interested to see what you all think about the race thus far on the Democratic side as well as on the Republican side. Of course, the Republican side has been just a complete show. It's it's uncanny how much of a show it's been. In recent days, we have transitioned from talking about some policies to talking about Donald Trump and his member, if you want to call it that, which to me it's just been gross and ridiculous that we would even take the time to discuss that in a presidential race. I don't know who at CNN or some of these other places have decided that out of that out of last week's debate, when that was brought up, who decided that that would be the lead in to the discussion about what they talked about at that debate. Yeah, it's funny or tragic, however you want to talk about it. But the fact still remains that these four people are running for the presidency of the United States. And for you to lead, yeah, you want ratings, but you're going to get the ratings anyway because you're talking about the election and everybody wants to know about the election. And so it is crazy for me that you would waste your time and our time to um, talk about that. It's uncanny that would even be a discussion topic for anyone um, who is running for president or discussing someone who is running for the presidency. It's just ridiculous. So now CNN is giving us some results from Michigan, even though a very small part of the state of Michigan is in the central time zone. It's like the most western tip of the UP is in the western is in the central time zone. So polls close in Michigan at 9 o'clock Eastern. So if you are watching this and you happen to be in line in Michigan, please stay in line. As always, if you are in line at the time that polls close, you are still legally able to vote. But CNN is talking about an estimated 25% of the polls are in, and is showing that Sanders and Hillary Clinton are basically tied. Sanders has 49.8% in. Clinton has 48.3% in. Once the polls finally close, then I think we'll be able to get better numbers about what happened. But with the only 1% in Mississippi, Clinton has 86.9% of the vote, and Senator Sanders only has 11.1% of the vote. Just again, it underscores what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. I don't understand how that works really in a two-person race. It's amazing. Something that is interesting that Senator Sanders has sued. I'm seeing this right now on CNN's homepage, and I will send a link to it so that you all can read it and let me know what you think about this article. Tweet me, of course, as always, at Say What Crane on Say What K Crane on Twitter, and you can email me at saywhatcrane@gmail.com. So it looks like Senator Sanders has sued the state of Ohio to allow 17-year-olds to be able to vote in the primary in that state. Typically, and I believe it is the case in Ohio, where if a student or a young person that is 17 but will turn 18 by the November general election date, then they are allowed to vote. And it looks like this is exactly what the senator is arguing here, that 17-year-olds are not being allowed to vote in the primary, but the law should allow for them to do so. And so we'll definitely stay on top of this to see what the governor and the Secretary of State does in Ohio for this. Of course, Ohio is a huge state, not only for the general election, but for the primary as well. If Senator Sanders is able to win in Ohio, Ohio is a different kind of ball game, but it has a lot of delegates. And so I'm sure that his camp is going to work extremely hard to ensure that these young people are able to vote. Of course, Ohio has many different colleges across that state, but again, it has a lot of delegates. Ohio and Michigan are neighbors, but they're nothing alike. As far as the demographics of that state, there are a lot more population centers in Ohio than there are in Michigan. You have Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, even Toledo, but this is a Rust Belt state. It's a very rural state. If anybody has traveled through Ohio, you'll know that going down I-75 It's pretty boring because all you see is fields on either side of the highway. It's a very rural state, which probably will play into the hands of Senator Sanders if he's able to um, get his boots on the ground and really galvanize the electorate there in the Buckeye State. So I don't even really like saying Buckeye because, of course, I'm an Ann Arbor native and we don't even do that. But just wanted to help you guys out with that. Just waiting to see what these poll results are going to look like coming in. On the Republican side, it looks like Marco Rubio is having a really rough night. Marco Rubio only has 9% of the vote in Michigan. If he's going to stay in this race, which I don't know how he really does, beyond Florida, it really is just going to be for show because I don't. He's only won one primary out of the 17 or 18 that they've had thus far, which it's more than Kasich, who has won none and is still in the race. But still, Marco Rubio right now has, excuse me, about 9% of the vote. Donald Trump, of course, is winning 37.6% of the vote. John Kasich, who is the governor of Ohio, has 27.4% of the vote. And of course, Michigan has not stopped voting just yet. They will stop in about 8 minutes. And so I don't really know how Marco Rubio stays. We saw reports on social media across today that Mitt Romney, who is thinking about jumping back into the race, or he filed papers. I think it's more so that he can elect some of his money and give it to, if this is allowed, which I'm not quite sure. I would definitely need to look this up, but to give his money that he had left over from his 2012 race to some of these other folks that are in the race to get Donald Trump out, which may work because he's definitely not running again. If he runs again, they might as well just hang it up and let Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton fight all the way to November. He's not going to win. It's just not going to happen. So hopefully he's just going to give money to these folks so that they can try to get Donald Trump out. But once again, it's amazing that they want Donald Trump out so bad when they allowed him to clown for the last 8 years and said absolutely nothing. They didn't say nothing about when he was trying to contest President Obama's birth certificate. They didn't say anything about him when they were saying that the president was unfit. They never said anything about him when he was going on news and going writing articles or doing whatever else he was doing, trying to act as if he was running for an elected office. But now, because he has galvanized so much support across the country from people who are, a lot of them are racist. Some of them are not, but way too many of them are. Now people are mad because they're going to identify the Republican Party as a racist party. Well, I mean, what do you want when you have a wing of your party that was spitting at congresspersons on the lawn of the United States Capitol? Your Tea Party did that, and you said nothing. You gave a medal of the Congressional Medal of Honor to people, but you have not held a hearing on the Voting Rights Amendment Act. You saw children being slaughtered in a school, but do nothing about gun rights. So, I mean, you're getting exactly what you, in essence, deserve to get. It makes no sense why you're all up in arms about this. This is the person that you all created, and now he is, in essence, coming home to roost and to ruin your Republican Party. And there was a piece today or a couple of days ago, that was talking about how there are many people of color, Black people in particular, who are conservative, but cannot rock with the Republican Party because you have too many people in your party that, in the words of Kanye, don't care nothing about Black people, care less about Black people. And you can definitely tell that there are some Black people in the Republican Party, and I don't fault them for being in the Republican Party. I think that there are some pinnacles of the Republican Party that are good. It makes sense to have balanced budgets. It makes sense to have some type of constraint on the size of government within reason. But the fact of the matter is that having a pro states party won't work for me. If you know the history of this country and you know how states have run amok, and one of the reasons why we have to have a 14th Amendment is to restrain how much the states are able to do, because when they were left to their own devices, then they were able to do things like slavery and like Jim Crow laws and like black codes, and um, you have to do too much to keep them in check. So I can't just have a pro states stance. But there are some definite pinnacles within the Republican Party that I get. But until the Republican Party decides that they want to be the party of smaller government, of being fiscally responsible, of those types of pinnacles of the Republican Party, they're not going to win Black people. You cannot be the party um, of not caring about these children that are being shot in the street, of trying to say that we made this up and that it's not a systemic problem. You cannot be the party of voter suppression laws and preventing people of color and children and the elderly from going to be able to exercise their constitutional right to vote, and want these entities to be a part of your party. It just will not work. You need to do the hard work of expanding your base. And until you do, the hardest thing for you, apparently, is to repudiate, in the strongest sense of the word, all the things that Donald Trump has done, and people like him, then you're gonna be doing autopsies of your party for the next 20 years. Um, and I know I got off on a tangent about that, but it really kind of burns me up that the party tries to distance itself from an individual that does exactly what many in his party does, has the sentiment of many within his party. It makes no sense. You cannot do it. You cannot play people for fools. They know, I mean, for one, you have the Google. So all I have to do is just call the roll about what has happened, and what the Republican Party has done in the last however many years, to figure out, no, you're stretching the truth, or you are making arguments that are completely false, or you're trying to spin this way out of proportion and it's not going to work. So all that to say, Donald Trump, you got to go. Ted Cruz is probably need to go out the door with him, which leaves Marco Rubio, which he probably won't win, and John Kasich, who has some of the worst voter suppression laws in his state, which is Ohio. So what you gonna do? I mean, really, I don't know. We're going to continue to monitor the race for the White House. Obviously, we're going to continue to uplift women throughout the month of March for Women's History Month, Her Story Month, and talk about some great women. I'm currently reading a book by a phenomenal woman who is talking about the Great Migration. So I'll bring that and show it to you guys next week. Hopefully you can go out and get it and read about the Great Migration. And there's a wonderful story about a woman. It follows three people and their migration from the South. And one of them is a woman who started in Mississippi, where my father's family is from. So I'm kind of interested about her story as well. So until next week, I will check you all later, and let us know what you're thinking throughout the week, and we might talk about it next week on the show. So see you next time for Say What Now. Bye-bye.